Yeah, look, on the face of it, having a licensing system for those working construction and quarrying to make sure that the people who are working in these areas, which can be dangerous and where lives can be lost, seems like a reasonable thing to do, and to streamline that and to have a licensing authority. And given the shocking figures that the HSA have produced in relation to fatal and non-fatal accidents over the years, the need for some measures to do everything we can to improve safety in quarrying and in construction seem to have merit. The fact that there was 1,616 work-related fatal accidents between 1989 and 2016 is a pretty shocking figure, and although they seem to be on a downward trajectory, if you look at the last couple of years, it's still far, any death in construction is unacceptable, or in quarrying is unacceptable. So all of that seems reasonable, although precisely how this authority is going to work seems a little bit unclear from the legislation, and quite a bit of it seems to be going to be pushed down the line in terms of ministerial orders or whatever, or the secondary legislation. But on the face of it, it seems reasonable. But I do think the big issue, and one example that I can think of from my experience of working with construction workers protesting against bogus self-employment, was the phenomena of cowboy contractors, essentially, who would have a crew of workers who other tradespeople would report on the sites were clearly not qualified to do the job that they were doing. And the situation of bogus self-employment facilitated that, because if you were a sort of contractor and the main contractor didn't have direct responsibility for the people who were working on the site, but it was a subcontractor, and the subcontractor would say, oh yeah, all my people are qualified, but there was actually no way of ensuring that that was the case. You could have people, and certainly tradespeople reported to me, often tradespeople who were blacklisted from sites because they were union activists. We can't get on this site because we're trade union activists, but that subby has people on who are clearly not qualified to do the job that they're doing, and are doing substandard work. And indeed, I remember bricklayers, for example, pointing to the footings that were being done. I think they're called footings, not that I'm an expert in construction, on council houses that were being built in my area. Well, I've worked on a few building sites, having said that, but I didn't do footings. I didn't do footings. I did dry lining and labouring. But bricklayers pointing out that the work that was being done was substandard, and that it would lead to cracks in the building and the occurrence of damp within a very short period of time. And of course, lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. Exactly what happened. The qualified bricklayer, the one with experience, who actually knew what work should be done to do those things properly, was outside the gate protesting because he couldn't get on the site, along with many other people, because they were known union activists, and the main contractor didn't want them anywhere near the site. And that was, by the way, building council houses. So now, because of the fantastic campaigning of building workers and groups like Building Workers Against the Black Economy, eventually, after a couple of decades of campaigning by construction workers, there have been some improvements in trying to clamp down on the issue of bogus self-employment. But there's no doubt in my mind that that contributed to the lack of health and safety, and to the dangers and accidents and indeed fatalities on building sites. So to have some licensing around that to ensure that people are properly licensed to do the things they're supposed to be doing is good. But the big issue is enforcement, and not just enforcement of these things, but enforcement of workers' rights generally on sites. And inspections that are meaningful, frequent, and that those who are doing these inspections around health and safety issues and around workers' rights issues are properly staffed and resourced, that there's a proactive approach so that they can actually see and identify when there's pressures on from the employers to cut corners, to not do things correctly. So even if people have the right licence, being put under pressure to cut corners. And of course, we know that we've suffered terrible consequences because of cowboy builders, but often ones that are considered respectable, ones that are still getting public contracts, that are still in business, actually building buildings that were totally defective because it was cheaper to do it, using the wrong materials or cheap materials, or cutting corners and putting pressure on tradespeople who often knew that the things they were doing were wrong and were going to have pretty serious consequences, or that there were major health and safety breaches going on a regular basis on particular sites, but terrified to say anything about it because they'd be flung off the site, they'd be blacklisted if they said a word about those things. So that's, to my mind, more important. I'm not saying that this isn't helpful to streamline these things, but as Deputy Smith said, there is a bit of an implication that it's, if you like, it's up to the workers to have the licence rather than up to the government to make sure that these things are being checked and inspected, and to make sure that workers' rights are being respected on construction sites, and that employers aren't putting pressure on workers to do things they shouldn't do or not do things they should be doing. And I think that is absolutely key. And one final point I'd make in this regard is I'd be interested to know or hear if the officials or the Minister considers that all of this should apply to other areas where construction activities are involved, but which are not necessarily construction sites in the sense of, you know, physically building buildings or refurbishing buildings. And the particular instance I'm thinking about is film sites, where movies are being made, and where stages and sets are being constructed. Will all of this apply there? I would be curious to know, and the officials or the Minister may or may not know, but I've a long-standing interest in the concerns that have been raised by film crew about the lack of proper rights and health and safety on film sets. Even though public money is being used to finance film production in this country, and I welcome that fact, and indeed that funding for film production in this country, there's up to about €100 million a year, is supposed to be tied to quality employment and training and to compliance with all employment legislation. But certainly, if you listen to what many film crews say, that's not actually what's going on the sites, on the sets, should I say, and that indeed workers who raise health and safety issues, who raise the issue of working excessive and dangerous hours, because building a film set can also be a very dangerous business. You're doing many, if not all, of the same type of activities that you do when you're building buildings, using dangerous equipment and so on. So if people are being made work excessive hours, in excess of what they should legally be required to do, aren't getting the sort of time off that is necessary in order for them to recuperate, and so on, that these pose very serious health and safety risks. But at least some of the film crew, many of the film crew say, if you say anything about these things, you won't be asked back to work on the next film. And you will be actively blacklisted, as many of them say they have been, because they raise issues like health and safety. And I'm interested in that regard in terms of the register that you're talking about and how that would work, because one of the things that's been very actively resisted by the film producer companies is actually having a proper register of the different grades of people who work on the film industry. Now that they've finally been sort of pressured into establishing some kind of register, that the people who are essentially going to put that register together are the self-employed contractors who hire and fire the crew. The very people who often are guilty of forcing people to work excessive hours or blacklisting them if they say anything about what's happening on the film set, if they make any complaints or the like. So it's terribly important in that regard that any register needs to be insulated from that kind of thing. Any pressure that there might be from employers to use that register in a way that can, if you like, discriminate against people who might be raising questions about health and safety issues or employment rights issues on a set or a site. So I'll leave it at that, but a few questions we might hear a response to.